Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning.
Let's go ahead and get started. We've got a ton of ground to cover this morning, so let's go ahead and pray, and then we will jump into our discourse this morning. Lord, thank you so much just for this opportunity we have. Thank you for this Sunday. Thank you, Lord, for your truth and the clarity of it, that we can understand it and that we can glean from it, understand you and how you work in the various economies. Pray, Lord, that this would be beneficial, that this would be profitable for us, and that you would be glorified in this discourse. And thank you so much for it in your son's name. Amen. Okay. Let's go ahead and get it started here. We are going through the timeline of Daniel. At some point, I'm going to put a big one together. So if you want it, you can have it. I'm not going to do that yet. But at some point down the line, I will do that for you guys to have for your notes or whatever. We are tracking the last chapter that we looked at occurred probably roughly around 586 BC. Daniel at that point in time was now 35. This was the period of time where Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were placed in the fiery furnace. Where we are now is probably 20 years ahead of that particular incident, that particular event. And Nebuchadnezzar is just about to pass away. And he has his last or final dream from God. And he is recording this. Really, I believe Daniel is the stenographer of this particular dream that he had. At this point now, Daniel is approximately 58 or 59 years of age, where we are right now, and it is 563 to 62 BC. This is where we left off at verse 34. Okay. It says, but at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed and the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. We had specifically focused on this verse last week, or this statement last week of Nebuchadnezzar, and the importance of what this statement meant. That this wasn't just some type of fly-by-night acknowledgement of God, but that he was switching sides, right? Marduk, he understands, is false. Okay? And as a result of that, he is convinced of the God of heaven, who he refers to as the Most High. The statement of Nebuchadnezzar, again, is an acknowledgement of what will take place in the future concerning the kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. He has acknowledged this. He didn't get it in chapter 2, but now he gets it. That God's kingdom that he establishes will reign forever. That no person will be able to overthrow it. It will not be passed on to another. The kingdom and its qualities will exist from one generation to the next. I believe this also plays into the successive statements of Nebuchadnezzar. As I mentioned before, Nebuchadnezzar, due to the personal acts of God towards him concerning his life, his position, realized not only that the God of heaven holds all the influence, all the power, but it is also an admission tacitly that Marduk and the entire Enuma Elish, the thing that he used every year, traveled to Barsippa and read this every year, what the high priest would read every year, is not true. It's false. As a result, Marduk could not save him from the loss of his reason. Where was Marduk when his reason was gone? And could not restore the kingdom to him. How come? I mean, if Marduk is the one who is the possessor of kingdoms and gives dominion, why couldn't he give it? Why couldn't he restore him? Because he doesn't exist. This brings us to verse 35 of chapter 4. we read the following statement here of Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 35. It says, all the inhabitants of the earth are counted as nothing, but he does according to his will in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and no one can ward off his hand or say to him, what have you done? Right? It's time we take let's look at this statement here, accounted as nothing. Nebuchadnezzar makes again another admission based upon what has happened to him. He mentions this word here, accounted, or Daniel writes this down. Accounted, kasab, is the Aramaic phrase here for accounted. It only occurs once, and that is here in verse 35 of chapter 4. This word comes from the root word kasav, meaning to count, to think, to devise, or to consider, to ponder something. Okay? This word also discusses, again, how one thinks and considers a certain subject, a certain plan, organization, or to count a specific thing, right? To detail that. So to consider, I believe, is he's not counting anything, but to consider, to ponder, to think about a particular thing, a subject or a person or whatever it is. Nothing is the Aramaic word law. This phrase occurs 82 times in the scriptures and 69 times in the book of Daniel, where the remaining ones are in Ezra. This Aramaic word, again, is associated with the verb accounted and is translated as no, nor, not, or nothing. This word underscores a negation. Okay, so considered or accounted as nothing. All the inhabitants of the earth are regarded or considered nothing. What does that mean? Well, again, looking at the context of Nebuchadnezzar and his experience, Nebuchadnezzar understands something about himself as well as humanity. That Nebuchadnezzar understands based upon the actions that happened to him. Remember, not only was his authority taken away from him, but so was his reason. That would leave somebody a little vulnerable, I think, right? And not just his reason for like a month or 2 months, but 7 years he had to deal with this, right? He understands that humankind does not have the power that they believe that they have. Hence, they are regarded or counted as nothing. He thought that he was worthy of the throne because Marduk thought he was oh so special. He mentioned that all, that is the Aramaic word kol, this word includes every person, especially him. He puts himself in the circle. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the party, pal. Right? Nebuchadnezzar, again, based upon the Enuma Elish and this tablet, that is his tablet, the tablet of Nebuchadnezzar, believed that since he was operating in the authority of Marduk to rule the most powerful nation at the time, he was convinced he was oh so important, oh so significant. Marduk smiles down on me because I am so special. The God of heaven said, no, you're not. I'm special. You're not special. I give things to you. As a matter of fact, we see kind of this mindset, again, in the tablet of Nebuchadnezzar. as we read the following. This is what Nebuchadnezzar wrote in cuneiform script. This is the actual tablet here. He says, O eternal prince, Lord of all being, guide in a straight path the king whom thou lovest and whose name thou hast proclaimed and was pleasing to thee. You know, whenever Marduk said my name, he got chills down his spine, right? I am the prince, the favorite, the creature of thy hand. Nebuchadnezzar realized that the kingdom that he had was on loan from the God of heaven. Nebuchadnezzar understands, since it is the God of heaven, the God of the heavens, who has taken away his reason and effectively his kingdom and authority, and I would even submit to you, gave it back to him. Okay, he lost it. It was kept. He lost his reason. His kingdom was preserved for 7 years and then given back to him. What an example. This also meant God is not the respecter of any person, regardless of their status or their influence. In other words, they are counted or regarded as nothing. It doesn't mean that a person is worthless. That's not what it means. It means that when in comparison to God, there is no comparison. Okay? That God is no respecter of any person. All the inhabitants of the earth, he continues, all the inhabitants of the earth are accounted as nothing, but he does according to his desire in the host of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. Nebuchadnezzar then acknowledges that the Most High does according to his desire. This word, this Aramaic phrase is seba, in the host of heaven. He does what he desires. This is in comparison to Marduk, who doesn't exist. Marduk doesn't do what he desires because he's not real. Okay? But he just encountered the living God, who is real. Let's talk about this phrase, host of heaven, for a minute. This Aramaic word occurs only once, and that's here. Okay? The word hosts or host is the Aramaic word kalil. Okay? It occurs 7 times in the scriptures. Now, sometimes, depending on the context, it is translated army, like a sizable army or host of individuals. It also refers to power, one's influence. It can refer to strength, the strength that one has, or might, which is essentially the same. It's like a synonym for strength. So it could be influence by number. It could be power in terms of influence or strength. Heaven, so this is the word here, hosts. It's translated here, kalil. And shamanim is the Aramaic word for heaven. This phrase appears only 28 times in the book of Daniel. And it refers to a sky, heaven, or abode, a dwelling. In this sense, it refers to the sky, the heavens. Okay? Again, the word so far, when it discusses God, it refers to God who abides there. Okay? I think this is not translated army. It's not talking about any army or anything that he has. It's referring to the strength or the influence of God who abides there. Matter of fact, we've kind of seen this underscored in previous passages, in previous texts of Daniel. For example, in Daniel chapter 2, okay, a couple of pages over, verses 17 to 18, we read the following, okay, concerning Daniel when he prayed to God and God gave him, they were praying to God concerning the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had. Then Daniel went to his house and informed his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, about the matter, so that they might request compassion from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the men of Babylon. They appealed to God who dwells in the heavens. That's kind of the deal. If we read forward in verse 19 and following, we get the same information and somewhat similar to the same phrase. Then Daniel went to his house and informed his friend about the matter. He requests compassion from the God of heaven concerning the mystery, so that Daniel and his friends would not be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Again, this is not the phrase the host of heaven, but it is associated with it concerning the God and the location. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 28, just a couple of verses below, Daniel, talking to Nebuchadnezzar, says this. He says, however, there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries, and he has made known to King Nebuchadnezzar what will take place in the latter days. This was your dream and the visions of your mind while you were on your bed. And he begins to explain the dream to Nebuchadnezzar. But before he does that, Daniel identifies, right, who gave it to him, right? And that was the God in heaven. Verse 37, going down a little forward in chapter 2. After Daniel gives his explanation or the details of the dream, he begins to start to explain to him what the dream means. And he mentions the following statement. You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. I find it to be very fascinating that even in chapter 2, Daniel told him that God gave him all this, and he still didn't get it until now. Daniel chapter 2, verse 44, down further, discussing the kingdom that will be established and the origin of that kingdom. He says this, in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left to another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it itself will endure in perpetuity. So the point of the statement of host of heavens, based upon the language and the context, that is the immediate and extended, I would say that this ought to be translated strength or might. Remember, even Nebuchadnezzar was to look to heaven to be restored. Remember that? That he acknowledges that heaven rules, right? This ought not to be translated army, but I believe strength, the strength of heaven, as this is the abode of God who dwells in the heavens. And since this is the only time that this phrase is used, I also believe this is a direct attack again on Marduk. Because where did Marduk dwell? In the heavens. Again, in one sense, this is an admission that Marduk is not the one who was established in the heavens. By the way, this is parallel with other declarations that are found amongst Israel. They're found all over the place, but let's go to one such example. Turn with me, if you please, to the Psalms. Psalms 115. I believe this is somewhat Nebuchadnezzar's declaration This is a very short psalm. Actually, I'll just read verses 1 to 8, though, because that's relevant for us. Chapter 1. I'm sorry, Psalm 115, chapter 1. Verse 1. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name or your reputation give glory. Because of your loving kindness, because of your truth. Why should the nations say, where now is their God? But our God is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases. Doesn't that sound like Nebuchadnezzar? All of the inhabitants of the earth are regarded or considered as nothing, right? But he is found within the host of heaven. Verse 4, their idols are silver and gold, the work of man's hands. They have mouths, but they cannot speak. Think of the golden image, right? They have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. They have noses, but they cannot smell. They have hands, but they cannot feel. They have feet, but they cannot walk. They cannot make a sound with their throats. Those who make them will become like them. Everyone who trusts in them. Very fascinating. Nebuchadnezzar's mindset has been changed based upon the fact that he understands that Marduk is nothing but a phantasm, a mere statue. That's it. Marduk favors the rulers of those who are established in Babylon. This was when he was convinced of the Enuma Elish. And now we see that the God of heavens does not favor or regard humanity in terms of their position, status, influence. Okay? It doesn't matter to him. He gives it to them. Nebuchadnezzar, in verse 35 of this text, acknowledges the activity of God among human beings. I believe that it occurs within, again, the economy of law here. Nebuchadnezzar could identify with this action well to due to the fact that God influenced Nebuchadnezzar personally. God is not taking people's reason away in this economy. Okay, and Nebuchadnezzar is a king, right? He had the greatest influence at the time, right? People looked to him, and the Babylonian citizens looked to him, right? So when he spoke, they leaned in, they listened, right? What an incredible testimony of Nebuchadnezzar to have his reason taken away and have Daniel write this for the Babylonian people to read in the annals of their history. This is Babylonian history. Okay? The statement is made during the economy of law where God deals with nations through their kings and their rulers. He is not doing this now, contrary to popular belief of what you see on YouTube. Okay? Verse 35, and no one can ward off his hand or say to him, what have you done? What an admission. Again, if we were just to take this by itself, well, of course this is true, but let's infuse the culture into this. Let's look at the cultural implications of this. This is an amazing admission from King Nebuchadnezzar. Amazing. Again, this discusses the powerful nature of the God of heaven, that no one can stop his activity. Wait a minute. Didn't he believe that Marduk, that no one could stop his activity? Yeah, we remember that, right? From the Enuma Elish. Remember this? Remember this statement? This wonderful statement here? Let a man rejoice in Marduk, the Lord of the gods, that he may cause his land to be fruitful, and that he himself may have prosperity. Marduk's word standeth fast, his command unaltered. The utterance of his mouth no God has ever canceled. What a statement. And Nebuchadnezzar said, whoops, right? Going back to Nebuchadnezzar's reconsideration of Marduk, remember, Marduk's command and strength could not be canceled, could not be changed by any god, any god, any god, any. Until he met the God of heaven, right? Let's continue here. He goes, at that time, verse 36 of Daniel, chapter 4. He goes, at that time, my reason returned to me, and my majesty and splendor was for my glory and for my kingdom. And my counselors and my nobles began seeking me out. So I was reestablished in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. Nebuchadnezzar repeats what happened to him once again. He does it just, so nice, he does it twice. He repeats it again. He looked up to heaven and acknowledged the God of the heavens. His reason or his knowledge returned to him, and his kingdom and his status was returned to him. Again, this was once more not only a completion of the dream that he had that was given to him, but again, it was a slap in the face to Marduk, who was the one who establishes kings and kingdoms. Underscoring again that Nebuchadnezzar is turning his back on Marduk. Again, we see this in the tablet of Nebuchadnezzar as well in this cuneiform script. Once more, I'll just read the highlighted portion here. Again, it says, I am the favorite, the creature, I am the prince, the favorite, the creature of thy hand. Thou hast created me and hast entrusted me with dominion over all people. Man, that was before Nebuchadnezzar encountered the God of heaven personally. He doesn't believe that now, right? Now, this is a kind of an odd statement. It says, so I was reestablished in my sovereignty or my kingdom, really, and surpassing greatness was added to me. So not only was his kingdom was restored, but he got even greater influence. What? That doesn't seem fair. So why was surpassing greatness or majesty added to him after this? He was given more influence? Well, why is that? That doesn't seem fair. It doesn't have to be. Because God already told him this. The reason why he would get influence. He already told him why. In chapter 4, verse 25, he mentions the following. Daniel says this about Nebuchadnezzar when he's explaining the dream to him. He mentions that you will be driven away from humankind, and your dwelling place will be with the beasts of the field, and you'll be given grass to eat like cattle, and you will be drenched with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time or 7 years will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is the ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whoever he wishes. That was the whole point of him having his reason taken away, his kingdom taken away, to acknowledge God as being the true God. And the result of this would be influence not for Nebuchadnezzar's sake, but for the sake of making the God of heaven known to men. In verse 31 to 32 of chapter 4, the voice that spoke when Nebuchadnezzar was having his proud moment looking upon the city of Babylon, admiring what he built, he said the following, while the word was in the king's mouth, a voice from heavens saying, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, sovereignty has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from humankind, and your dwelling place will be with the beasts of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle. and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is the ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes. This was the point. It wasn't because Nebuchadnezzar was so great now. It was because he's the example. He has the greatest influence during the time in history and has been impacted by God himself. This was to spread the testimony all over the known world that God, the God of heaven, is the true God, period. This is why the surpassing greatness was given to him. Verse 37, what an admission. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven. What a statement. That's how we know he's got it. For all his works are true. His ways are just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride. Last verse here in this chapter. Last statement. Amazing. All these words, all of them, are connected to the statement in Daniel chapter 4, verse 34. The Aramaic word praise, sebcha, we looked at that a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks ago, which is associated with acknowledging a deity. It could be real or imagined. They were sebchaing Marduk, right? He's not real. But now Nebuchadnezzar is praising the God of heaven. The Aramaic word translated exalt, rum, is associated with elevating someone or something with a person's speech, kind of holding them up by the words that they speak. And honor is the Aramaic word hadar. We looked at that last week, which underscores by one's magnifying, is kind of putting someone in the spotlight by how they talk to them, recognizing them by their speech. So Nebuchadnezzar is magnifying him, he's elevating him, he is acknowledging him, basically saying that he's the real deal. And the fact that he uses now I, Nebuchadnezzar, we know that it's only him talking, no one else. This is his own personal testimony. This is only directed to the King of heaven. It is here that Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges that God is supreme over all people. Going back to the tablet of Nebuchadnezzar, again, this is a slap in the face to Marduk. Again, because what does he say in his tablet? He goes, you've created me and entrusted me with dominion over all people according to thy favor, Lord, which thou dost bestow on all people. Man, I love history. This is incredible. Cause me to love thy exalted lordship. Create in my heart the worship of your divinity and grant whatever is pleasing to thee, because you have my life. This is Nebuchadnezzar's pride here. Remember in Daniel chapter 2, verses 47, or Daniel chapter 2, verse 47, he pointed that the God of heaven was everyone else's God, right? He goes, the king answered Daniel and said, surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and the revealer of mysteries. He's yours. That's nice. He's not mine though, but he's yours though. I like him. He's cool, right? He's the man, right? In Daniel chapter 3, verses 28 to 29, he said this about the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar responded and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel to deliver his servants and put their trust in him, violating the king's word. and yielded up their bodies so as not to serve or worship any God except their own God. See, our gods are still real. He just doesn't want you to worship ours. That's cute. You can keep them. That's fine. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or tongue who speaks anything offensive against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. See, don't talk bad about them, right? Don't talk bad about their God, right? We still have ours, but don't talk bad about them. Otherwise, you'll get destroyed. You'll get torn limb from limb and have your house burned down and things like that, right? We'll take away your credit line. But don't speak it. Well, our gods are still cool, right? He's now adopted the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego as his own. That's what that means. True. Kashote. All of his ways are true, or his works are true. Kashote. This is a good word here. Aramaic word occurs 2 times in the scriptures. As a matter of fact, we already saw this word when he says, surely your God is the revealer of mysteries. That word surely is that word kashote. Okay. Truly. This word only occurs in the book of Daniel. It is translated as surely or truly, right? This is kind of cool. I love this word, kashote. This word describes that the King of Heaven's word and his works, everything that he does corresponds with reality. That is incredible. Because if you think about Marduk, Marduk can't do works that correspond with the reality because he doesn't exist. Man. Is it just me up here getting excited? I felt, man, this is incredible. Just the word deen. The Aramaic word here occurs 5 times in the scriptures, 4 times in the book of Daniel, once in Ezra. It is known as judgment or just. Okay? It's translated in those ways. This word in Aramaic describes that the King of Heaven's, his works and his ways are right. And they're just. So all the things that Nebuchadnezzar has said in his admission, he acknowledges that God's works, all of them, and what he wants Nebuchadnezzar to do, to acknowledge him, is a just, right thing, because it corresponds with what's real. Remember, with Nebuchadnezzar, Marduk, before he knew this, Marduk was the highest God and his ways were true and right. He could kill people innocently, and it was right. He could take advantage of the poor, and he was right in doing so because Marduk gave him that authority to do that, to rule. But now he realizes that because God's works and ways are just, his consideration of his activity should align with that of what God commands him to do. Which is why Daniel told him, hey, maybe you should do works of mercy and maybe God will be merciful to you, right? When he mentioned that earlier in the chapter. Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges that God's ways are true and they're just, which means, again, it underscores that he believes that now the God of Daniel is his God. Verse 37. We're flying through here. Let's talk about this statement. Humble those who walk in pride. Nebuchadnezzar finishes his testimony, his account, that the King of Heaven is able to bring low. That's the word there for humble, to bring low those who walk in pride or arrogance. The tablet of Nebuchadnezzar, that is a tablet of arrogance because he's worshiping a God that doesn't exist. In this sense, due to Nebuchadnezzar's perspective of Marduk, this made him arrogant or a prideful person. It's not like he walked around with his nose in the air thinking he was just the best thing since sliced bread, because that's just what he was. He believed that Marduk gave him this authority, and that caused him to do that, right? This is about Marduk. God interacted with Nebuchadnezzar in a personal way for this reason: to bring Nebuchadnezzar low and show him his God that he favored and admired all this time was false. What a chapter. Let's look at the pertinent and supplementary questions. Of course, this is from our way back when we asked pertinent questions in each chapter. So if you still have that paper around somewhere, we've been going through these questions and answering them, right, rather than doing a review concerning the book of Daniel. Why does King Nebuchadnezzar write in Daniel's book? Well, it's very simple. This was written to declare from his own personal words, his own words, his own words. This is a king speaking, a Gentile king, no less, about the God of heaven, that he is the true God, not only for the Israelites, but for the Gentiles too. Right? And not Marduk. Why is this historical account number 2 placed here in Daniel? I believe that this is strategic. Since chapter 5 does not include Nebuchadnezzar, I believe this is right before his death. Right? When we go into chapter 5, there's a whole new king. Right? And I believe that Daniel is the stenographer of this account. I don't think that Nebuchadnezzar wrote this. I believe that Daniel wrote this as Nebuchadnezzar was speaking and talking to him. Why didn't Nebuchadnezzar bring up former signs and wonders that occurred in the previous chapters? We talked about this. Well, the signs and wonders that were in the previous chapters, chapter 2, chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar was an observer of those. Although they were for him, he just didn't get it, right? But this one involved him personally. This one impacted him in a deeper way than the other ones did. Number 4, does the God of heaven's kingdom exist at the present time? It does not. It does not exist in the present time. Daniel understood who establishes kings and kingdoms. Again, this is an admission of what Daniel told him back in chapter 2, that one day God will establish a kingdom that will endure forever. And that kingdom is certain in Nebuchadnezzar's mind because of what Nebuchadnezzar experienced. He knows that this is true. Why was the surpassing greatness or majesty added to him after this? Well, again, the very point was to demonstrate to Nebuchadnezzar that God was the one who builds and establishes kingdoms and kings. And this was to be an example to the world at large, right? Concerning who the true God was compared to Marduk. Chapter 3 was the rulers, right? And they were to be sent out. Now it's him directly. So to sum up, chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar, due to the personal acts of God concerning his life and position, realized that not only that the God of the heaven holds all the power, but it is an admission that Marduk and the Enuma Elish are false. Right? Marduk could not save him from his loss of reason, could not restore his kingdom to him, and as a result of that, Nebuchadnezzar becomes a believer in the God of heaven. Will we see Nebuchadnezzar there? I am fully convinced we will. No doubt about it. That concludes the end of chapter 4. In 2 weeks, we will jump into a prelude into chapter 5. There's some things we need to talk about before we get into the meat of chapter 5. So let's go ahead and pray, and we'll end here. Lord, you are God. We are not. You are powerful. We are considered as nothing. You are not a respecter of persons. You have just demonstrated that with this account of Nebuchadnezzar, that it does not matter our status, our influence, our ethnicity, our culture. It does not matter. You show no favoritism to anyone. You don't need to. And yet you are gracious to all of us, to Israel and to Gentiles. May we remember this. May we think about this, ponder this, that you are the God of the Hebrews, but you're also the God of men all over. Thank you so much for who you are and for what you have given to us. For it's in your Son's name.